Part-Time Hitter is brought to you by Friendly Forces, a 501c3 nonprofit committed to helping reserve component members seamlessly integrate their military service with rewarding civilian careers. We connect them with employers who value their unique skills and critical role in national security and advise organizations how to become more reservist-friendly. Check them out at www.friendlyforces.org. Friendly Forces is also brought to you by the Fratty Guard, a lifestyle brand for part-time hitters. Check them out at www.thefrattyguard.com and on Instagram at @thefrattyguard. All right, welcome to another episode of the Part-Time Hitter podcast brought to you by Friendly Forces and the Fratty Guard. I am Alec Evans, and today I'm here with Alec Emmert, who has a pretty interesting background all around. He's the first Navy reservist we've had on the podcast. I think possibly the first non-Army guest I've had now that I think about it. But he has a breadth of experience as a Navy nuke with the active duty Navy, going to grad school, working at McKinsey, eventually transitioning to the Navy Reserve as a foreign area officer and being one of the founders and the CEO of Service2School, which is I'll let Alec talk more about it, but essentially they help service members get into primarily, I believe, grad school programs, but undergrad as well. So thank you so much for being here today with me, Alec. Did I screw anything up in your bio at all there?
I was not a Service2School founder. They were around for about a decade. Yeah, but I am the CEO, and we our big focus actually is on undergrad admissions, helping enlisted vets out. Main focus is that enlisted veteran going to a challenging undergraduate institution, but we do everything like MBA, JD, even up to PhDs. But that's our bread and butter is the undergrad.
No, it's awesome, man. It's been around for a couple years. I was applying to grad school for a period there a few years ago. It didn't work out, but I remember I had used or reached out to some folks at Service2School to get some help on some things. But yeah, man, you have a pretty impressive background. As I said, undergrad at actually let's start out Naval Academy, then a master's at Georgetown, MBA at Wharton, worked at McKinsey. You were in the U.S. Navy, so probably one of the more impressive people we've had on the podcast so far. A lot of them are kind of like my dipshit friends who happen to be serving. So you're making them look bad right now. But yeah, man, I'm always really curious how people sort of wind up doing what they're doing. So why don't you tell me a little bit sort of how you started out with the active duty Navy and how that brought you to where, ultimately you are today.
Awesome, man. And like I am a lot of people's dipshit friends. So thank you for the kind words. They're not deserved. But to the question about my background. So the origin story is I was born in DC. My dad was a foreign service officer. Spent the bulk of my childhood actually in Rio de Janeiro, Brazil. But he retired from the Foreign Service as I was starting high school. So did high school in the DC area, and I grew up in the shadow of the Naval Academy there. And for me, actually, even when I was in Brazil as a kid, Navy ships would pull in, and I get tours of them from from the sailors there. My father was able to set them up through the consulate, and I'd always just wanted to join the Navy. So did that, went to Annapolis. I was there pretty old. So I started in 2001. So I was there when 9/11 hit.
Oh yeah.
That really kind of shaped the early part of my military career and my motivations. And for me, I chose to go into the submarine force because, I thought when it comes to defending our country, there's a clear link between the submarine, what submarines are out there doing for national security, taking on the enemies, our major enemies and all that, and keeping us safe. So that's why I did that. So wanted to make sure 9/11 didn't happen again. So I did that for about 5 years in the submarine. On submarines, you do your training and then you serve on the submarine. So I did a couple deployments to CENTCOM, and then after that first 5 years, those were my first 5 years in the Navy, which is your initial commitment. And then I went on to do a year and a half in Bahrain, a little over a year in Italy on what we call a shore duty. I believe in the Army, y'all call it a B billet. And to me, that was what really got me interested in a lot of the foreign affairs stuff. So I got the chance to go to Ukraine for a decent period of time when I was based in Italy. to do some training there with their forces, and ended up getting out. The reason was I was pretty burned out, so I came home and ended up working a job for Booz Allen Hamilton doing nuclear consulting. Did that for a bit, but I got bored, and this is where the reserves come in. So I was looking to get back out there and do some stuff, and this is probably about the 2014 timeframe, and that was when ISIS was really kicking off,
Mm.
and I just wanted to get out there and get back and just be involved, really just be back in the mix. And so I was able to affiliate what we call as in the reserves. I don't know what the Army's phrase for it is, but I got the chance to affiliate with the Navy Reserve and was applied for a mobilization with the Joint Special Operations Command. And this was an incredible opportunity that I'm highlighting for reservists. So to put in perspective, as a submariner, there is really only, I want to say, one or two opportunities for junior officers to do that type of work every couple years. And it's just so hard to come by one and get one. But as a reservist, you can apply for them. And granted, you have to go through a selection process that's not the way that like the tier one operators do. There's nothing like physical, you're not out there rucking through the woods or anything like that. But like there's a fairly extensive background check they put on you. You've got to take the Wonderlic test and a few other personality tests to make sure you're up to snuff. And if you pass all those, you score high enough, you get the opportunity to do some pretty cool stuff. So 2014 to 2015, I got the chance to deploy to the Middle East with one of their units as a mission planner. So was not kicking down doors. I was sitting in the jock, but watching some people do some pretty cool stuff on a pred feed. So that was a awesome experience I had.
Yeah.
Thanks solely to the reserves or being a part of the reserves. Then that role parlayed itself to some consulting work in the region where I was on a State Department contract. And then I decided to hit the reset button and go to business school. From business school, I went to Wharton. From business school, I went to work at McKinsey, where I was part of its private equity practice. And then through that whole process of going into business school and all that, I worked with an organization called Service2School. And I had been a mentor and I'd seen the good work that they were doing. And around about my end of my second year at McKinsey, one of their founders reached out to me to see if I'd be interested in becoming their CEO, and I was. So this is end of 2022, beginning of 2023. So it's been about a year and a half, a little over a year and a half that I've been in this role, and I've loved every minute of it.
That's awesome, man. I still don't really quite understand how the Navy Reserve work exactly, because in the National Guard and even the Reserve, you tend a lot of the time to deploy like as an entire unit, and I don't think the Navy Reserve tends to work that way. It's more like kind of individual augmentees for the most part. And then like, or do you so you have like a weekend drill type thing in AT, the way the Army does?
Yep. So it is different. You're basically right. There are some units that'll deploy as units. A lot of the supply, they've got like cargo handling battalions, things like that will go out
Mm.
as units, but it is primarily more so focused on individual augmentees. And so what it is each reserve unit will have a particular active duty unit that it supports. So in my case, I actually got the chance to work with some of your civil affairs guys. So I was
Oh,
part of the unit
nice.
that supporting CTF 56 in Bahrain. And so I can get into my journey to becoming a foreign area officer a little later, but I was a foreign area officer. And so my specific job with that unit was I was in the five shop, the plans and policy. And so my job was to support international engagement that they had. But there's other people there. So if there's demand for engagement, which there was while I was there, I'd go overseas and help them out with it. But we've got like ATFP people, and so if there was a demand for them, they'd go over and support the unit. And so it's more on a case by case basis for particular skill sets. And so, yeah, to your point, there, that's 100% right.
Do you find that there's let's say like tomorrow you lost your job and you either couldn't get a new job or you were interested on like going on orders with the Navy. Like are those opportunities out there where you could fairly easily find something to go do like on active duty with the Navy?
Yeah, 100%. So there are so many of them because the bottom line is that it was especially on staff jobs because the Navy's op tempo hasn't really gone down. It's actually picked up since the GWAT because we're gearing up for China and we're dealing with threats in Europe. So there's kind of like There's two separate theaters where really there's a huge demand for people to, or a huge op tempo for ships. So with that said, there are a lot of staff billets, shoreside billets that need to be filled. And so they typically fill those in many cases with reservists. So,
Hmm.
and I want to say like manning at most shore-based commands. I'm just pulling this number out of a hat, but it's directionally accurate. I'd say it's like about 70%. So they're always looking for
Hmm.
people.
That makes sense. And the way you're describing how it works, it almost seems like the Army Reserve should work more closely to that model than the way it does. As a foreign area officer, I'm pretty sure within the Army you have to be, and actually what rank are you, if you don't mind me asking?
Yeah, 04 lieutenant commander. So
Okay. Yeah, so in the Army, I want to say at a minimum to be an FAO, you have to be an O4, but I feel like most of them are probably O5s. So like that's a role that I think would be like super interesting, but I would have to wait a while and probably have met some other gates before I would be like allowed to go do it. So you were just able to basically come from being a submariner and doing the kind of the selection process, and they're like, okay, you're good to be like an FAO now. And did you need like additional training to be able to do it, or was it just like you're a smart dude who's done some stuff and you figured it out?
oh man, so that I got so much for this one. All right, so first off, pitch for the Army. So I went through a joint foreign area officer course with Army Reserve Army reservists, and I
Hmm.
think that the criteria to become an Army Reserve FAO is pretty similar to being a Navy Reserve FAO. So I'll give you all of that. And there were a few, I believe, at the O3 level, pretty O4 heavy. And also from your background, I saw a lot of civil affairs folks in the Army side, a lot of XSF guys made the transition for obvious reasons. And so just at a high level is what the job entails is there's three key areas that Navy foreign area officers focus on, and I believe it's pretty similar across the board. And so, big thing is a lot of us will work on staffs at COCOMs, doing regional engagement with partners. Another area is foreign military sales, so working with partners to figure out their armament
Hmm.
situation, go through that lengthy process that they have to go to
Yeah.
buy our equipment. And the third one is embassy work, and I found out about you through my affinity for the fratty guard on social media. I know he's big into the embassy parties. So if that's
He
your
talks about
vibe,
embassy parties quite a bit. Yeah. And I mean that sounds like that's what I think of when I think of a foreign area officer is like that stuff. Not like the legalese of foreign military sales, but just sort of
yeah.
bullshitting at cocktail parties at the embassy. Did you get to do any of that or a fair amount?
All right, this is a good story. So the culminating event of like our crucible at the Joint Foreign Area Officer School is a mock cocktail party
Oh my
where we have to
God.
I kid you not, like we had to there was like a specific instruction of like the kind of suit we had to bring, and then we're basically being evaluated at this and given feedback on how we schmoozed or how well we schmoozed.
Dude,
So
that's
there you go.
amazing. So I always
Chadwick
thought
Steele, like
I always thought part of the civil affairs training should have been something like that because that's really what it you know CA does a lot of stuff, but at the end of the day it's can you build rapport and sort of learn about the area you're operating in to sort of fill in some puzzle pieces. And if you can't talk to people and you're not likable, then like you're no good as a CA officer. And I imagine it's pretty similar as an FAO. How similar or different is it to being like a defense attaché, or is that the same thing, or is that different?
it's one of the things you can do. So it's harder to do it as a reservist because there's a fairly long pipeline, and a lot of times reservists are just in time fills. So they're like, we got a hot fill at this COCOM or something like that. But we have had reserve FAOs become attaches. It's typically at the O6 level. So that's kind of a
Right.
carrot they put out for you to stay in. And so actually the attaché to Madrid was a Navy Reserve FAO. He was there for 3 years, like went through the whole attaché process and all that. But his background is in the real world. He's a foreign service officer. So
Hmm.
essentially
Interesting.
the ramp up wasn't as challenging for him as it can be people without that background.
So besides the rank requirement or being able to operate effectively at a cocktail party, are there other like rigid academic or otherwise requirements to be a FAO?
Yeah, I mean, so it's like 90% of the battle is a cocktail party. Like you got to like look good in a suit and be able to schmooze. Just kidding there. No,
You're
so
selling
so
it,
this
man. You're selling it.
so this is yeah again Chadwick Steele. I want to see. I'd love to evaluate his cocktail party performance. See if it's up to Navy FAO standards. So here's what it is, and this was so fortuitous, like what happened to me. So I knew what FAOs were. I'd worked with them primarily, like when I was doing the stuff in Ukraine, and like I got to know the attaché there. He was a FAO, and a couple of the other guys there were. But I was getting out. I was like, this is a cool job, but my time has come. So I'm at McKinsey and I was on a project, and one of the senior leaders on this project and I were vibing. He was a really cool guy, very, very smart. And he was a Navy Reserve FAO. And we've just been talking about,
Mm,
you're Navy, like, what do you do? And he's like, I'm a FAO in the reserves. It's like, get out of town. You can be a FAO in the reserves. And he was like, yep. And so here it's very different from the active duty, because on the active duty side, you will come in, they will see you've got the raw ability through like your DLab score, or and a couple other indicators. You might have a particular master's degree or something, but essentially like, you'll have the potential to be a good FAO, and they will put you through all the rest of the training. As a reservist on the Navy side, and I think it's pretty similar in the Army, is there is a set of criteria you have to meet, and once you meet all that criteria, you're essentially really a fully qualified FAO. And that's why they bring you in on the reserves, because they don't have the time or the resources to train you up.
mm,
They just want somebody who's got that skill set to begin with. And so, in no particular order, you've got to come with a TSSCI clearance. You have got to have a warfare qualification. And it's kind of a Navy specific thing, but I believe in the Army, it's like a branch qualification. So you're an infantry person who's done X time, performed well, hasn't failed to meet standards or anything like that. You've got to have a foreign language at a 2-2 or better. You have to
ah,
have
that's the rub.
you have to have experience operating in that region of your language for a year plus. And then the last one is the one that gets a lot of people, is the what they call it a regionally focused masters. But that's a little like, what does it mean? Like, a lot of times people with poli-sci degrees, masters international relations, things like that, will get by with that. How I got by with this is a pretty funny story. So when I was at Wharton, you have to take 19 classes to graduate from Wharton. Only 15 of them have to be from the business school, and so you can take 4 freebies from the rest of the University of Pennsylvania. So, given my background in Brazil, I was like, I'm just going to take a bunch of like random Portuguese classes. So I took a class on Brazilian cinema, took a class on Portuguese literature. And so I wrapped all those up, and then they gave me a certificate in Latino and Latin American studies, which I was like, okay, cool. But that
Huh.
ended up counting as originally focused masters for me. So had I not done that, I probably wouldn't be here today.
So you speak Portuguese then?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay. How do you know Portuguese?
Yeah, I got it growing up in Brazil. So it was basically like total immersion, and
Oh,
it
that's
got
right.
hardwired in there as a kid. So yes, I went to an international school, but it was taught primarily in English, but you would take Portuguese classes, and the majority of my friends were Brazilian, so we just spoke Portuguese. And Brazil as a country is not an English speaking country. It wasn't then. I don't think it really is now. It wasn't a place where you could just go and start talking English to people and they'd understand you. So it was really true total immersion from an early age, and I've just never really forgot it.
So then you as a FAO, you would never be sent to like Russia as a FAO. You'd only be sent to like Portugal or Brazil.
Yeah, so that's funny. So we do send people around. There's a preference to send me to Southcom countries, but I spent about a year in the Middle East just now on ADOS orders as the deputy commander for a maritime security task force. And what made that work was we've got an international maritime task force there, and a lot of our partners there come from Europe and South America. And so my ability to speak Portuguese with them was really helpful in terms of getting stuff done. Again, official language is English, but if you know someone's native tongue, it's really, really helpful in terms of building rapport and getting stuff done.
Interesting. Yeah, man. I mean, it's too bad I was like already starting to put the pieces together about how I could become an FAO, but I'd have to learn a language and I guess have a master's degree, related to that language, which I don't know is going to happen at this point in my life or my career.
Yeah, yeah. And so here's another cool FAO story for you. So, or reservist story. So with my unit, again, it was Task Force 56 in Bahrain, and this actually will throw in some civil affairs stuff for you as well. So I was part of this unit. I was the five plans and policy guy, and there was a demand for a plans guy and someone with an international background who could do international exercise planning. And so I was called up there on ADOS orders, and I got the opportunity to be the deputy for an international maritime security task force, which was a pretty cool experience. And this was in Bahrain, but it's a 40 country coalition. So speaking, like, one of our biggest partners there is Brazil. They routinely command counter piracy task force. So having that facility with it's not just ports that speak other languages as well, but not Arabic, but having that facility with other Latin American and European languages was really helpful in terms of just like getting stuff done and being effective at my job. So I've yet to go to South America as a FAO, and I've just done all my time in CENTCOM. So as far as my role there, I've done a lot of exercise planning and some task force operations, partner training, and things like that. And where the language skills have come in handy there is the fact that a bunch of our partners are Portuguese and Spanish speakers, which are my languages, and then that's made getting stuff done a lot easier just in terms of building rapport and things like that. So even though I'm a Southcom guy, I've spent the bulk of my time in CENTCOM.
Yeah, that's funny, man. I don't know if you heard me say this or if my internet crapped out, but I would just need a language to be able to become a FAO, but I don't know if I have the energy or time to do that. So I'll have to find some other loophole. But it actually does sound pretty similar to civil affairs.
Yeah, and so this is the cool thing. So we had a civil affairs debt. I'm not sure what the right phrase for it is, but it's oh no, CAT civil affairs team was working with us. And the really interesting thing is, well, that coalition is primarily focused on illicit maritime activity, which is trafficking of people, drugs, and weapons. And what was really cool about it was that the civil affairs team was focused on the end customer, whereas we're focused on the actual goods that were being smuggled. So there was a direct tie there. We're like, these goods are going to which country, and we would figure that out and work with the civil affairs teams to enable that effective partner interdiction of those. And then we also did things with them, including like disaster response drills and things like that. So there's a direct tie there with
Yeah,
you all. So I much respect for the work you do.
do you happen to know if those CA guys you were with were on the active duty side or the reserve side?
Majority of them were reservists that I worked
Oh,
with.
interesting. Awesome.
Yeah.
Actually, doesn't the Navy have civil affairs, or do they
No, we
not?
did away with it. Yeah, we used to have, what was it called? MCAST, Maritime Civil Affairs Support Teams. So we had those, and I think we got rid of them.
Okay, that makes more sense. I know somebody who came over to the Army after like a career in the Navy doing that, and the what I heard was that he came over because his job no longer existed in the Navy. Yeah, man. I mean, we kind of touched on it when we were talking earlier, but there's so much, and I don't know if any active duty people listen to this podcast or will, but there's just so many cool opportunities doing this part time for you to sort of, like I like to say, sort of choose your own adventure and plug in, doing things you find interesting that kind of fit with your schedule in a way that like you just that's not how the active duty military works whatsoever. But as a reservist, you, like you said, you can find these like amazing opportunities that you probably wouldn't get on active duty, but you're able to do it as someone who's part-time. And I don't think a lot of people on the active duty side understand that, and if they did, I think they might consider assessing into the reserve.
And yeah, and that's really it. And for me, what I love about the reserves is, to your point about choose your own adventure. You can pick the type of assignment you want to go on. You can volunteer for it, but you're not forced to do it if it's right for you. If it's something you like, in my case, I was really motivated to go and do the job I did for JSOC because I saw what was going on with ISIS. It got me fired up, and I want to get overseas and do stuff. So the beauty of the reserves or the guard or what have you, any type of reserve job, is that the only time it's really disruptive is when you're overseas doing stuff. So if you want to get out and do stuff, you can, but you can also have a day job. You can do stuff you like back home. And when I was on active duty, I loved being deployed. Like all the assignments, even when I had the opportunity to go for a shore assignment, I only wanted to go overseas and be kind of at in an operational environment where stuff was going on. I didn't want to just kind of sit at home and twiddle my thumbs. So the reserves are great for that, because that's really it. Like you exist to deploy, and when you're not deployed, you're back home doing your thing, but you don't have to kind of deal with the everyday, more boring, mundane aspects of being in the military.
Sure. And, at least for me, it can be a super nice break from kind of the grind of your regular job to go, take a pause and go do something basically completely different. It doesn't have to be, but completely different from your regular job. And I think it helps you appreciate sometimes your regular job a bit more when you come back to it, but just also gives you opportunity to sort of take a breather and go do something different for a while.
Yeah, 100%, man.
So you were talking earlier before we started recording, about an issue that's kind of near and dear to my heart with Friendly Forces, which is how employers support reservists when they're deployed. So you had a particularly sort of interesting story about when you were deployed with McKinsey. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yep. Yeah, I'll share it 100%. And so the big thing is, I don't want this to come across like trashing McKinsey. It's all factual, and it's actually more of a testament to the advocacy that I had from some of the senior leaders there, who really helped me out and helped other reservists out about this issue. So early 2022, I was kind of like, I started at McKinsey in 2020, and so I was kind of hitting the glide slope of that first. They've got levels you are. So, I was at the associate level, getting ready to, become a manager, and, everything was going really, really well. I had a team I was working well with, and, I was feeling great about it. And then Vladimir Putin decided to invade Ukraine, which was just not cool. But to that end, I had been qualified. There's a theater submarine watch. I know your listeners are Army, so you probably, I'm just going to dump it down a little bit, not because you're dumb, because you're Army. It's pretty technical. Essentially, I was one of very few reservists who are qualified to stand the senior submarine watch in the European theater, which deals with like working with U.S. submarine watch, which deals with managing our assets, working with partners to coordinate operations and things like that. And on top of that, I had done time in Ukraine, and so I was immediately contacted and asked to Europe to assist in the response to that invasion. And so I told McKinsey that I'd have to head out at I had a set date. It was for a few months, and they gave me the paperwork. I hadn't really done any research into their reserve policy, and it hadn't really affected me all that much, because I hadn't done any AT. I'd stepped down into the IRR for a bit, and I just recently got back into SARA. So kind of an aside there, but get the reserve policy. And there was a line in there that said, the intent is not for this to enrich you, or this assignment to enrich you. And they were very pointed about, you will get no more than 3 months pay differential. You won't get a your, I believe it's like my 401k wasn't prorated or things like that. My bonus would be prorated. It was not a very, what I felt, equitable policy, because I was, what I felt, doing something very important. It was something that was important for my country. That was something that was important for the world. And I was almost being made to feel bad about it. So this letter really made my blood boil. So, went overseas. When I came back, I brought this up to some of the senior leaders there. And I did my research. And I think this is a lot of the work you're doing there at Friendly Forces, where I was where I found different companies' reserve policies. And so where I benefited from this was, I'd been to business school and I just reached out to my different classmates at different companies and asked, hey, can you send me your reserve policy? And I worked with a couple other people. One of the guys is probably just quick aside, one of the most impressive people I've ever met in my entire life. So he is a SF guardsman who is also a Rhodes Scholar and a partner at McKinsey.
Wow.
So
he's still in SF.
Yeah, he's SF in the Guard.
Wow.
Yeah, so he is the real deal. And
I should have him on, man. You got to give me his name.
Yeah, I'll shoot him a note to see if he's interested. So he just had a kid, so I'm not sure what his his schedule's looking like. But he's just a salt the earth type guy. He was heavily involved in getting his Afghan interpreter back stateside. Like I remember, he and I were working on this project together, and he was just like stepping away from client calls to talk to people about how to get his buddy to the States. So that's the kind of guy he is. So, essentially went through my presentation and then was good with it, gave me some pointers, and then he pushed it up to, there's a senior partner. So this guy is, he was a Army vet and, pretty big wig here at in the States, McKinsey's North American office. And he ended up being good with it and pushing it to the head of our North American operations to revise the policy, which would essentially remove the language about it not enriching us. I highlighted how that was not really a cool way to phrase it, and then also ensuring that we got a pay differential for up to a year, because that's the length of time of a lot of deployments. And when you think about it, if there's a family that's used to getting a McKinsey salary, and then you cut it down to
big time, huge delta there,
and that's going to put them in some financial straits. So what they did was, made it, that year pay differential, which is on par with like a lot of employers. And we've been talking about some that are crazy generous. So like I found J&J gives you like 100% of your pay while you're deployed. And then a buddy of mine, he was a banker for UBS, and he had been deployed and got like 100% of his investment banker salary. So I hate to say it, but he was enriched while he was deployed. But to that point, he was off doing good work. But so yeah, that's really it. And so the big thing there is, it was a frustration, and it was something I took action on and was able to enlist support of some great advocates, and we fixed a problem for our reservists. And I think that could be a lot. I'll say this: there's two lessons there for your listeners. So number one, if you are in the reserves or the Guard, take a look at, before you sign on the dotted line, take a look at that reserve policy, read the language in it, and it'll give you a good sense as to how that company views military service. If it says something about you're getting enriched or anything like that, you'll know that that's a pretty solid red flag. Now, the other thing, though, too, is that the best way to get anything done is to work with your fellow reservists and veterans. At the time I was an associate, I was very low level. An associate is, I don't know, like maybe like the equivalent of like an O2, maybe an O3 at the firm. So I was very low totem pole, but I was able to get help from some very, very powerful people who made it happen. And so if you see something you don't like, bring it up to some people who will advocate for you, and they can likely get it done.
Yeah, man. So having those internal advocates in the organization is so critical. People who understand and get it. And I actually just worked with an organization to improve their military leave policy from 2 weeks differential to 12 months differential. But I was only able to get it done because I had a guy on the inside pushing it forward, working it to sort of open people's eyes. And there were some other veteran advocates there who pushed it forward. But to your point about red flags and asking to see the policy, that's actually a big reason why I started Friendly Forces, because a lot of times, if you're talking to a recruiter or even the hiring manager, and they're not a reservist, they weren't military, they have no idea what the policy is. Even HR doesn't know half the time. The policies are often outdated. And then sometimes they'll be like, oh, we can't share that information with you. It's proprietary, which I always thought was the weirdest answer to that question. It's such a basic question, and it shouldn't be proprietary or confidential or whatever. So the intent behind Friendly Forces was to put that information out front, so you didn't have to have that awkward conversation. Because the other piece of it is, if you're trying to get hired and you're already asking some of those questions, it can come off to them like, oh, this guy's going to be gone all the time, or he's already asking about time off. Screw this guy. Let's go to the next guy. You know what I mean? So it's saving people from having to have those conversations and giving them the data to make those decisions on the front end. But yeah, I mean, to me, another pet peeve of mine is I don't know how much revenue or net income that McKinsey organizations like it make it in a given quarter or a given year. But obviously, some organizations can afford to have more generous policies than others. And yeah, I mean, I had seen much smaller organizations, much smaller budgets have better policies than that initial policy that McKinsey had. I think sometimes it's just them, internally, HR being naive and not understanding, oh, our peers and our competitors are doing a much better job than us. We just need somebody to bring it to us and let us know, and we can change it.
Well, yeah, and that was the key, and that's what I really got some help for in terms of data presentation from the mentor. The at the time he was an associate partner, now partner. Before we briefed it, we essentially just made a chart where we had all of our peer organizations. You take your BCGs, your Bains, your Deloittes, some of the banks up there, and it's just like, this is us. These are our benefits, and it was like, months of pay differential, 3. And then across the board, it's like 12, 24,
12.
some even
Yeah.
36. Or then the other one is pay differential or like full salary.
Full
We
pay.
found
Yeah.
that full salary. And here's the thing, like that's above and beyond. Like if you're going to pay full salary, good on you. That's awesome. Like I love the support, but I feel that just giving a differential is equitable. So your family won't take a
Sure.
financial hit while you're deployed, especially if you're in a
Big time.
lucrative job.
For
Like
sure.
you've got, yeah, more, you didn't get the mortgage you got with an O3 salary. You got it with your McKinsey associate partner salary. So
Right.
you got bills to pay.
Yeah, man. Yeah, 100%. And that said, I can't imagine either. Like, I don't know how many people work at like McKinsey North America, but there probably can't be more than a handful of actively serving reservists, I wouldn't think, right? I mean,
Yeah,
how
there's
many?
not many. There's like, I just anecdotally, I'd say about a dozen.
Yeah, so that was going to be my guess because certain industries don't lend themselves as well to having another sort of part-time job like finance, banking, high-level consulting. They work some pretty crazy hours, so I think culturally some of those places just haven't caught up to like this other stuff. But again, it's also another reason to maybe be not be shy about being generous because like it's not affecting a huge amount of people in your workforce, but the people it is affecting, it's has a massive effect on, and not just them, but their families. And again, these people aren't going out picking daisies. They're doing things to defend our country in a myriad of different ways. And then even when they're on orders, they're developing skill sets and networks and things that they can bring back to the company later on to help add value there. So it's to me, it's just a win-win to support people like you and me in doing these things.
Yeah, and I do feel it's like it really is a two-way street too, because you take people with private sector knowledge, private sector experience, and the skill set we have. We're a huge value add to the military. As
Oh
much as
yeah,
I like to say, like I'm a cool guy out there kicking down doors. The bulk of the work I do is building PowerPoint presentation, and so bringing my ability to make a deck that tells a solid story from McKinsey to a COCOM is a huge asset, right?
100%.
And we all know the recruiting challenges that our military is having. We're all short staffed. So being able to get people with real world experience into or corporate experience into these environments is really really good, really good for the country, or sorry, good for the military and the country as a whole as well. So I think that that's another thing that we can just kind of keep pushing is the value that reservists bring to the country.
Yeah, big time. I was actually thinking about that just the other day, and that just once you have civilian experience, especially in an area like consulting or something like that, you approach problems and processes differently once you're on military orders in a way that they don't do it, and it's a huge value add. I've seen that firsthand in my experience. So yeah, I mean, I can't agree more. And then the other point that I like to make is again, like we're serving in the place of others. It's an all volunteer force. If people like you and me don't do it, and again, the reserve component now makes up roughly 40% of our total force. Pretty big part of our military. If people aren't doing it voluntarily, willingly, then at some point something will change and maybe people who don't want to serve, may be forced to in some capacity. So again, we're doing it in the place of other people who can't or won't do it.
And like that, to your point about the 40%, I certainly hope we don't have a major war in my lifetime. But in the event that that happens, you're going to need the reservists are the bench, right? You're going to need to be pulling a lot of people off the bench. And the sharper and better prepared they are, the safer we're all going to be. And so that's why we want to incentivize smart people, capable people to serve part time so that in the event that the worst does happen, we'll be set to win.
100%. And that actually brings up another point where, because this is something I look at when I look at military leave policies, I look at if they build in language that differentiates like, oh, well, we'll pay diff if it's a deployment, but not if it's for training. And I'm like, well, that training, it's not up to the service member that they have to go do this training, but also that's necessary for them to be able to do the job for when they get deployed. So you shouldn't be saying, oh, this is worth pay diff and that isn't. So, I look very closely at those types of things. And when I'm identifying like the most friendly companies, I'm making sure that they're not adding in those caveats, which a lot of them actually do.
Yeah, yeah, that like your AT, you won't get pay differential for your AT and stuff like that. Again, so that to me, yeah, I mean that's not cool, like not cool at all. Because you're going to take a like in many cases you're going to take a pay hit for those 2 weeks, so you'll make less money in a given month, which is not great for your family back home. So yeah, again, that's a really good point and one I actually hadn't really thought of.
Well, an AT is one thing, right? Like I can go 2 weeks on my Army pay, but I've been to plenty of schools that are a month, 2 months, 3 months, 5 months long, training wise, and that's where it's like, yeah, I'm not deployed, but I mean, I'm about to take a serious pay cut here. I have a wife, I have a kid, I have a mortgage, and now my income's been halved. So
Okay, so
go
like
ahead.
active duty ADT orders, active duty for training orders, they wouldn't pay a differential for those. Oh wow, that's not cool.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of them, they add that condition in, and I will, when I do my analysis, that's the type of thing I bring up, and I explain why, especially because every company says and wants to be military friendly, and I'll kind of circle and redline and say, well, this isn't a super military friendly thing to do. So do you want to be military friendly or not? And it's at the end of the day, it's educating them and informing them. It's not necessarily malice. It's just they don't have the full picture. And up until now, as far as I know, I'm the only one who's kind of out there like fighting this fight, which is interesting.
All right, welcome back, everybody. We had some technical issues there. I think we might have been hit by an EMP, and we weren't able to finish recording in our previous session. So I'm back with Alex Emmert a few days later to basically close out our discussion and learn more about his organization, Service2School. Alec is the current CEO of Service2School. They're doing some pretty cool stuff. I could give it a high level pitch, but I think you'll do a better job, Alex. So why don't you tell us what is Service2School and what is the work you're doing and how can people get involved?
Sure, yeah. So at a high level, if you are a veteran and you served your country honorably, or you're still on active duty and you want to pursue higher education at any level, whether it be an associate's degree all the way up to PhD, we will help you out for free. The bulk of the people we work with, about 70%, are enlisted veterans who are looking to go to undergrad, but we also have a fairly robust MBA support program, do some law school support, med school, etc. And the way we work is if you are interested, you can sign up on our website. We'll put a link in the show notes, and you will get an onboarding call with a member of our staff. They'll figure out your educational goals, where you're at in the process, etc. And if you're at a point where you are ready to apply to school, they will pair you with a near peer mentor we call them ambassadors, who's someone who is typically a veteran who's gone through the academic track that you intend to go down, and they will be able to be an honest broker and give you the support you need to get into that program you're looking to go to.
Will you help people, like will you pair them up if I'm trying to get into Harvard? Will you connect me with somebody who knows Harvard or who went to Harvard, or is it more?
Oh yeah, typically, yeah. And so we've actually got a software system that it uses a matching algorithm based on a few key dimensions, right? So it's what branch of service did you do, or were you in? What was your rank? What schools are you interested in? And so I mean, I'll give you an example. So I actually went through the program myself. So I've been through the whole thing on multiple levels. So I started out mentoring undergraduate veterans. I then went on to want to get an MBA, and I had a mentor myself who got me into business school. Business school I had no business getting into. And then afterwards, I started mentoring MBA applicants. So having seen that, typically like what we will do is we will look to get someone with a similar background-ish, similar academic goals. So if I'm looking, I'm just going to throw this out there. So say I'm like looking to go to, I'm an undergraduate veteran. I'm looking to go to, my top school is, you said Harvard. I'm like, all right, I want to go to Harvard. Well, we might not have someone who went to Harvard in our pool at that point that you can be matched with, but we'll send you someone who went to a comparable school, like maybe a Princeton, a Yale, or something like that. So in my case, my top choice business school was Wharton, but I was paired with someone who went to Harvard Business School. I was a Navy submariner. They paired me with a guy who was a Night Stalker. He was a West Point grad. I was a Naval Academy grad. So there
Marines of the
what's up?
the sky.
Yeah.
the submarine of the.
Yeah. Hey, well, there's more aircraft in the ocean than there are submarines in the sky, so that's what I'll hang my hat on. But yeah, yeah, at the end of the day, so like yeah, we weren't totally similar, but we had both done like kind of like secret squirrel stuff. You've done fairly arduous type service and wanted to go to a similar type program, so we talk the same language. So that I don't, that's a long-winded answer to your question. Is we try to get it pretty close.
I applied to Wharton MBA as well back in 2020. I applied with a 510 GMAT. It didn't work. I thought they'd be impressed that I had the balls to apply with that, but they weren't. Don't let that discourage you.
Did you highlight your hardcore service as a civil affairs operator?
Well, this was before all that, so I didn't have that to lean on. I didn't have ChatGPT to write any of it for me either.
Man, dude, the game has changed. Wait, how old are you now? If you don't mind me asking.
37.
You're not. I got into Wharton when I was 35, so not too late to throw your hat in the ring. And then, another fun fact for those of your listeners, like there's EMBAs. The executive MBA is like if you want to go to Wharton's executive MBA program, they've got a fairly robust group of veterans there. And they don't care about how old you are or where you're at in the process. And the GI Bill benefits you get there are the exact same as if you were to go to the regular Wharton. It's just almost like a one weekend a month. Like I think it's like you'll do a 3-day weekend. Which if you're in the Guard, I guess it's a tough pitch back home. We're like, well, I got to do a weekend of school and a weekend of drill, but it is out there.
Yeah, if I end up doing it, I would definitely do an EMBA. I'm just not sure for me necessarily, like in my career path, if I would derive much value from it. I think usually people use those as kind of check the box things for promotions within their current company. But yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, it's also a pretty solid flex too. So
that's true.
Yeah. So $200,000
I have
2 years of work flex.
But cool, man. So do you get a lot of Guard Reserve people currently using Service2School, or are you trying to get
we do
put the message out there more to them that you exist to help them?
So the short answer is yes. Okay. We do have a fair amount of reserve/guards people who work with us, and we really don't discriminate on what kind of service you did. A lot of times people will be hesitant. They'll say, oh, I never deployed. I never, I wasn't on active duty. We don't care. Our motto is, if you went through boot camp and you're serving or have served, you're good. It's good enough for us. So, in my case, I worked with a guardsman from Georgia, and he had an incredible story. Like he got activated, went to Syria, came back, and the humanitarian toll he saw motivated him to want to be a doctor. And so he said, what's the best way I can do it? Go to top college and apply to medical school. So we helped him get into Yale. I personally worked with him, helped him on his application. So he got into Yale and then now is at med school. So that's just like one example. So for your listeners, if you're at college and you're interested in going to grad school, you can use us. And then we've even known people who are in college, have taken a break to go and do service and then or to go into the reserves or Guard, have come back, finished their degree, and then used us to go to grad school. So the full spectrum's available if you're in the Guard or reserves.
Awesome. No, it's a great resource. I believe I used it back then. Again, I don't think I was ready for the rigor of the process, and I tried to cram for the GMAT the day before, and it didn't work. But Service2School is a great resource, whether you're officer enlisted or regardless of the type of level of education you're looking to use. So definitely use it as a resource. We're going to link it here. Alec, thank you so much for your time, man. Really appreciate it. I'll have to have you back on from time to time to get updates on where the hot embassy parties are and what we're seeing in higher education. But thank you for your service, for what you're doing with Service2School, and we really appreciate your time. Do you have any closing thoughts for the listeners about either military service or Service2School?
Yeah, so the big thing I always tell everybody is don't self-select out. And at the end of the day, we have seen so many success stories at Service2School, and people often doubt themselves and say, hey, do I have what it takes to go to a top college? And the answer is you do. We have so many success stories at Service2School, and each one of them started with someone with just filling out that intake form and getting some honest advice on a school that they should be considering. And our advice to them is always shoot for the stars. You never know where you're going to land, and don't self-select out. And I'll close with a quote by the notorious Russell Wilson, which is, "Why not you?" And to your point, Eric, you said, "Oh yeah, why not apply to Wharton with a 510?" People have gotten into Wharton with 510 GMATs. Just shoot your shot, give it a go, and Service School is there to help you out.
Shoot or shoot. All right. Well, thank you so much, Alec. Really appreciate your time. And to the audience, stay part-timing out here.